Florida will be the state to watch next year as there is a new initiative that is being proposed in the legislature that will be huge for precious metals and Floridians, and in reality, it will send shockwaves across the nation. We'll talk about it and so much more as we explore. We all know about gold and silver. It is listed in the Constitution in Article 1, Section 10 as money, hundreds of times in the Bible. And for those of you who have been following my channel closely, you'll know that I've been covering news like this for many states in the Union that have proposed even something much less important than what Florida is going to be proposing here. And it's what I do on this channel. I like to bring you the latest news. So if you enjoyed content like this, hope you will consider subscribing to the channel and pressing that thumbs up button if you find value here. But I do like to kind of confirm to see where things are going before I report on them as well too. And this is something that has actually been reported over at the 10thamendmentcenter.com. And there was also an interview that was given lately by some of the legislators on another channel as shared with me by Gold Chick. So this is something that's big. One of the organizations that has been spearheading initiatives like this is the Sound Money Defense League, and even they have not picked up on this yet. So that's why I was sort of late in bringing this news to you. But this is fascinating, and I think it's huge because they're one of the few states that are actually, if this is enacted as proposed, will recognize gold and silver as legal tender. And for a state as big as Florida, well, it's even bigger news. I'll get into that in a moment. Bills filed in the Florida House and Senate would take several steps to increase currency competition with sound money in Florida and set the stage for the people there to undermine the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money. Representative Doug Bankson and Representative Chip LaMarca filed a House bill, H697, on the 4th of December. Senator Ana Rodriguez filed a companion in the Senate, that's S750, on the 6th of December. The legislation would treat specie legal tender as money in the state. That's important, as money, recognizing it as actual money. And there's going to be several things that will cascade from this that I think will be a great benefit to Floridians. Specie legal tender is defined as specie coin issued by the federal government at any time, and any other specie designated by the chief financial officer as legal tender pursuant to the monetary authority not prohibited in Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution. So there you go. They even reference the seminal piece from our Constitution itself, and that article here, that section that explicitly recognizes gold and silver as legal tender. Under the proposed law, specie legal tender may be recognized to pay private debts, taxes, and fees levied by the state or local government or any subdivision thereof. By allowing the CFO to designate additional specie to be used as legal tender, Florida could free its citizens from potential supply constraints imposed by the use of only United States minted gold and silver coins. Yeah, can you imagine that would actually be a thing? Supply constraints if they actually start to use it as money, for, eagles, both gold and silver eagles, and heck, even platinum, maybe, I don't know. But anyways, more importantly, the people of the state of Florida would be able to define what specie is considered constitutional tender, further distancing themselves from potential control of the competing currency in Washington, D.C. And that means that other coins from other sovereign nations. Now, this, some people argue, since this doesn't have a denomination on it, that this silver libertad is not a coin, but I think it is recognized by the Mexican legislature indeed as money in and of itself, and by the weight is essentially its denomination. So, silver being money, plata pura, it is what it is. So I think that's quite fascinating to see, and that they're giving some leeway here. And so Under the proposed law, specie is defined as bullion fabricated into products of uniform shape, size, design, content, weight, and purity, which are suitable for use customarily as currency, as a medium of exchange, or as a medium for purchase, sale, storage, transfer, or delivery of precious metals in retail or wholesale transactions. Think about that. Uniform shape, size, design, and content. That means things like even this silver bar can be utilized as money. And because it's of a uniform size, 5 troy ounce, recognized as a common size, denominated by the weight. And this bar here, made in America, would be a perfect example of something that could be transacted. Heck, even this silver bullet, transacting in bullets themselves with the weight and purity noted here on this piece. So there's a lot of different ways that this could be done and implemented and utilized, I think. And I think that flexibility is quite remarkable, because it doesn't just tie it to any particular government or type of silver or gold utilized. Pretty amazing. The legislation would also facilitate online and other forms of electronic payments by gold and silver. Electronic currency is defined as a representation of actual gold and silver specie and bullion held in a depository account, which may be transferred by electronic instruction. So practically speaking, these provisions would allow Floridians to use gold or silver in both physical and electronic form as money, rather than just as mere investment vehicles. In effect, it would put gold and silver on the same footing as Federal Reserve notes. Yep, that's right. You probably heard me talk about that before with regards to a much wider scale. And that scale is the Bank of International Settlements, who in April of 2019 delegated gold as a Tier 1 asset, up from a Tier 3 asset, putting it on par and equal with cash. So this legislation would practically set gold and silver to be on the same footing as Federal Reserve notes, yep, as Tier 1 asset. That includes gold and silver. Pretty amazing. Passage into law would make Florida the 5th state, only the 5th, to fully recognize gold and silver as legal tender, and definitely the biggest state by far. Utah led the way, reestablishing constitutional money in 2011, a long time ago. Since then, Wyoming, Oklahoma, and Arkansas have since joined, and you've heard me cover those states when I talked about them before on this channel. But those states pale in comparison in terms of population compared to Florida. So, folks, this is a big deal, really not just for Florida, but for the entire nation. If Florida does this, it's going to make big news, and it's going to be a much bigger deal than those other states. Notwithstanding, what those other states have done should not be discounted in any way, shape, or form. It's a big deal for sure that those have done it. So I think this is just paving the way for potentially a bold move by other states of Florida's size or a little smaller. The effect has been most dramatic in Utah, where the legal tender law opened the door for the development of a gold and silver market in the state. With some legal hurdles cleared away by the state, the United Precious Metals Association, in partnership with Alpine Gold Exchange, set up the state's first gold bank. The Utah Specie Legal Tender Act also led to the creation of goldbacks, a local voluntary medium of exchange. And you've heard me talk about the goldback on this channel as well too. It's a relatively controversial thing, but here is an example of a Nevada goldback. It's controversial because people see it as a high premium gold foil note and sort of a gimmick, but it's not a gimmick, and it's really not meant for stacking. Yes, you can collect them, and people do collect them, but that premium that you use to put for that as a collector, well, you are not going to get that back, more than likely. But if you transact in them, that's what it's meant for, and that's where gold can be utilized as a voluntary medium of exchange. There are dollar-denominated notes made from physical gold. There's a process that turns gold into spendable physical form for small transactions, and goldbacks could make their way into Florida if this does come through as well too. They're actually like a currency in gold. It's kind of neat, paper currency, but it is indeed gold, polymer note. Now, this is where it gets really good for Floridians. Passage of H697 S750 would also eliminate all state and local taxes on the sale of gold and silver with the following provisions. Bullion may not be characterized as personal property for taxation or regulatory purposes. The purchase or sale of any type of bullion or form of bullion does not give rise to any tax liability. The exchange of one type or form of legal tender for another type or form of legal tender does not give rise to any tax liability. And surprisingly, the taxes are still levied on Floridians when they buy bullion. Florida, under current law, has a sales tax on the sale of gold and silver if the total transaction is less than $500. Eliminating all sales taxes would take another step towards treating gold and silver as money instead of commodities. Taxes on precious metal bullion erect barriers to using gold and silver as money by raising transactions cost. As Sound Money Defense League Policy Director J.P. Cortez testified during a committee hearing on a similar bill in Wyoming in 2018, charging tax on money itself is beyond the pale and immoral by any stretch, by any measure. In fact, he says here, in effect, states that collect taxes on purchase of precious metals are inherently saying gold and silver are not money at all, even though it's right there in the United States Constitution. Imagine if you asked a grocery clerk to break a $5 bill and he charged you a 35-cent tax. After all, you were only exchanging one form of money for another. But that's essentially what a sales tax on gold and silver bullion does. By eliminating this tax on the exchange of gold and silver, Virginia would treat specie as money instead of a commodity. This represents a small step towards reestablishing gold and silver as legal tender and breaking down the Fed's monopoly on money. So that was testimony again to, I guess, what was done in the Virginia legislature. We ought not to tax money. That's not a good idea. It makes no sense to tax money, according to former U.S. Representative Ron Paul, who said in testimony in support of an Arizona bill that repealed capital gains taxes on gold and silver in that state. Paper is not money, it's fraud, he continued. Well, I disagree with him on that. I don't disagree with him that it's not fraud. It is fraudulent, especially with what they're doing to it now, but I still think it's money. That's another story. Now, another aspect, a key part of this legislation is very similar to what is seen in other states. Provisions in H697 and S750 would establish a state-run bullion depository. We've seen this proposed in other states as well, too. A depository account holder would be able to purchase, sell, deposit, or withdraw bullion. It would include electronic systems for the purchase and sale of a bullion or depository account holders who cannot or choose not to travel to the physical location. It includes provisions for the creation of electronic currency backed by gold or silver and made available to the public. It would open the door for people to use precious metals stored in the depository for everyday transactions. Through the depository, Floridians would eventually be able to deposit gold and silver and pay other people through electronic means or checks. Private institutions or entities would be able to purchase goods and services using assets in the vault in the same way they use cash today. Doing so has the potential to open the market to sound money in day-to-day transactions. It was a similar law that was passed in Texas and signed into law by Governor Abbott in 2015. The Texas Depository received its first deposits in the summer of 2018. So this is big news, folks. And what's next is that these pair of bills will be officially introduced when the Florida legislature convenes on the 9th of January 2024. The bills must receive committee assignments, a hearing, and pass their respective committees by a majority vote before moving forward in the legislative session. So it hasn't even been introduced yet, but we wanted to bring it forward to you now that it's become official, and it's a press release here, and it's not even on the Sound Money Defense League site yet, but again, another channel has covered this with interviews with actually some of the legislatures, and thanks to a Gold Chick for pointing this out, and it's amazing. the news indeed. We'll see how this goes. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. I would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch, and to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.